anybody here saying, Lord, you can do it for somebody else, but just don't do it to me. We sing that song, Lord, whatever you're doing in this season, don't do it without me. But I will submit to you, if it comes to working in the church, we'll change the tune of it, Lord. Whatever you're doing in this season, please do it without me. My brothers and my sisters, I will submit to you that this is an interesting solution that Jesus presents to the problem. I don't know if you've heard of those that every time you take a problem to them, they just tell you, honey, go pray about it. Mama might be the one that say, just go and pray about it. You come to the pastor, you've been perplexed. They've been talking about you like a dog. They've been scandalizing your name. Nobody on your board wants to work with you. And as you express your distaste to the pastor, he calmly looks at you and says, honey, pray about it. As I look at this text and consider the fact that Jesus had neither sent the 12 disciples nor the 70 disciples out in the harvest yet, Jesus could have simply called enough laborers as he had already called the 12 or the 70. After all, he was Jesus. And if he stopped and called all the disciples, he could have called enough, for he knew how many were going to be needed. But listen to what Jesus says. He says, pray to the Lord of the harvest to force and thrust laborers into his harvest. Let us remember that Jesus has been going almost non-stop since he has started his public ministry. He'd been teaching, preaching, and healing all that had come to him. But let us put ourselves in the place of his disciples for just one moment. Take a trip with me back down memory lane. There we are with Jesus. He's already fed us. He's been teaching, preaching, and healing. We've seen the dead raised. We've seen the blind see. We've heard the mute talk. We've heard those that couldn't hear. We saw the woman that had an issue of blood for 12 long years. All she did was touch the hem of his garment and was made whole. But wait just 1 minute. We are the ones that he's called to be with him. And Reverend Wright, I believe if it was our church, that some of our members would say, I've been working with you, Jesus, for a mighty long time. And here you got the nerve to say, the harvest is ripe, but the laborers are few. What in the world am I to you, Jesus? What are you saying? Don't you trust me to go out and do the work for you? Is there somebody else that you must call? But I want you to understand today, church, Jesus knew what they were thinking, but he had to teach them a lesson that we can use today. Jesus, instead of saying, I'll call more out, Jesus said, well, if I teach these disciples a lesson, Reverend Wright and Reverend Moffitt, I know what to do. When there's a church that the pastor's left, they'll know what to do. When it comes time to do God's word, don't pick who you want to pick. Don't pick the one that's got the right degree. But Jesus said, pray to the Father that he'll pick who he wants. But what I like about it is, he didn't just say pray and wait about it. He said pray that God will move on them. He'll push them on out. He'll force them to go and do what he wants them to do. I heard many preachers say, I didn't want to preach, but he got tired of God whooping them. I heard folks say, I didn't want to be a leader, but when God got finished with me, I was ready to lead. Well, lest I weary your patience, let me use my spiritual imagination for just a few more minutes as I close this sermon. Reverend Wright, I can imagine that you had the same problem over at Oakey Grove. There's a lot more more work to do than there is workers. So let me address this problem of workers in the church. I believe I can identify why some folks won't work in the church. And that's why when you ask the question, who wants to work in the church, we don't get no answer. Well, the first thing we got to identify who don't want to work in the church. Is this one on, brother? We got to identify who don't want to work in the church. Well, I believe in my spiritual mind that you can look at some folk and determine that they don't want to work. Somebody say, well, Reverend, how do you look at them and determine they don't want to work? Well, you look down on their feet. They got on alligator shoes. You look at their clothes. They got on a designer suit or dress. You look at their hairdo. They done spent a couple of $100 on it. They not ready to work in the church. They might clap their hands, but not too hard. They might stand up, but they're not going to shout their hair out. And so there's one there that don't want to work in the church. There's some folks that are worried about what folks are going to say about them or who's on the board, and so they won't work in the church. There's some folks that realize that God gives a pastor vision and they want to implement their vision, and since it can't be their way, they won't work in the church. But I know my time's about to go, and so if you want to work in the church, what do you have to do, Reverend M? I hope you'll excuse me for just a minute. You see, when you come in the church, you got your alligator shoes on. You know you're not going to do nothing. You look at folks like, don't ask me, because I'm not the one. So if you're going to work, first you got to take off those shoes. Those alligator shoes represent our position. They represent my status. Of course, I can buy what I want to buy. Then you need to do what you need done. And if you ask me nicely, Pastor, I might give you a little extra on my tithes and offerings so you can pay somebody else to do it. But not only that, I took my shoes off, but now I still got my designer clothes on. I got a robe on which represents royalty. I got a robe on that covers up who I am. But I want to know today how many folks here in the congregation will go get under my car, let all the oil out, take out the oil filter and change it right now. What you gotta do if you want to work in the church, you gotta divest yourself of your position. You gotta divest yourself of your education. So hold on just a minute. I gotta come out of my role. I work in the church. And I work clothes. But wait just a minute, somebody said he got on some coveralls, but he still got on a tie. He got on a nice shirt. If I'm really gonna work, I'm still saying there's some things that you can't ask me to do. So if I can, if you don't mind, let me get ready to really work. Yes, sir. How I look when I'm working for God, and that's what's on the outside, what's on the inside. Out of this nice shirt, look at it, and you can see that it's a designer shirt. But I gotta get off my designer clothes. There's a robe I'm gonna get. It's not made out of my hands. It's never been seen. If I wanna get that robe, I gotta be willing. Shirt. Put on my shoes. I said, well, you don't have no shoes on, Reverend. I got some old shoes. I'm gonna put my old shoes on. Now that I got my old shoes on, I got my jeans on, I got my coveralls, my old t-shirt. I don't mind getting down. I can get dirty, get down on my knees. I can clean the floor if it needs to be clean. Whatever you ask me to do, Lord, I can do it. I'm not worried about how I Look, I'm asking this question today. Who wants to work in the church? Who's willing to take off all your pretense? Who's willing to take down all of your degrees? Who's willing to come down out of your position and just do what God asked you to do? Who's willing to work in the church? Standing all over the building. God calls pastors. He calls those that he wants in leadership positions. And what we need to realize is that all of us have a job to do. And there's no big job and no little job. You understand that if a pastor has no congregation, he or she has nobody to preach to. There's nobody to do anything. But then on the same token, the pastor can't do everything in the church. And so we all must work together as a family. And sometime in the family, you have to do a job that you don't want to do. When I first got married, and sweetheart, you forgive me, I'm going to tell on you. And me too. As I get ready to give an invitation, let me just tell this one little story. When my wife and I first got married, I grew up as the oldest in my family, and my dad had made us clean so that you could literally eat off of the floor. So there were some things that I didn't like doing. I would wash the dishes, but I didn't like washing the pots. And so I would call myself helping my wife out, ladies and men. And I would wash all of the dishes and I'd leave all the pots. Now I would, ladies, put water in the pots so they could soak. But then I left them for her to clean. And to my dismay and to my surprise, she wasn't happy with all the work I did, and I washed all those dishes back. And she said, if you're not going to wash all the dishes, don't wash none of them. But see, it wasn't long after that I found that there was something that she didn't like doing. She don't like to clean the shower out. She don't want to wash the bathtub out. And she definitely not going to take the trash out. I know, baby, our life is an open book. I talked about being transparent, so I got to be transparent. And so I didn't mind cleaning the shower and the bathtub and taking the trash out. And you know, sometimes she don't like a wet sink, so Pastor, she would dry the sink off. All right now. And you know, I had to tell her, you know, if you're not going to clean the whole sink, there ain't no sense in you just drying it off. I say this to say this. Sometimes God wants you and needs you to do something that you don't like doing. He don't need you just to do the part that you like and leave the rest of it alone. Whatever it is, there's a reason, because he has somebody that he wants you to minister to, or somebody that he wants to minister to you. And so as we stand, if you're here today and you don't know this Jesus, this man that the Bible records healed everyone who came into his presence, who is still in the healing business. I shared with the pastor, HHMBC has heard it, but I can never get enough of telling it. My wife is recovered from cancer. I'm a walking miracle. 2 years after she was diagnosed with cancer, I was diagnosed with cancer. The prognosis that the doctor gave me, the quality of life that he said that I would live, was a lie. God said, not so. And so I want you to know that God is still in the healing business.